Why Howls Moving Castle? Why Howl?
Why Howl? Without being super creepy. Of course, he is like a beautiful human and a great dramatic wizard man. I probably watched the movie first when I was around like 12 or something, and like it didn't really have that much of an effect back then because I was like, Ghibli movies, they're all great. Probably as into my 20s, start watching it again, and it started like becoming more of like a comfort movie because Howl's all like, he's this amazing wizard but hates responsibility and doesn't want to like do all the things that are expected of him. He wants to live in his crazy castle with all his stuff and
doesn't want to grow up.
Yeah, going like my 20s, kind of relating to that as well. Wanting to be able to do all the things I wanted to do, but you're having the responsibility of having to keep yourself alive.
And you just don't, you don't want to grow up, but you also want to be an adult and have freedom and stuff as well.
Yeah.
So, like, because you watched it when you were younger and then, like, obviously through your 20s and stuff, do you think it's one of those movies that you take something new every time from it?
I think for the first few times I watched it, like, I had a different perspective on it each time I watched it. Like, the first time was always just like, it's really pretty and great, and then, like, watching it more and more and thinking about it more in depth, and then even watching YouTube videos on it, picking out like little parts of it, and then even how it relates to like the book and how different it was. You just get little bits each time that's like new.
And because there's so many elements in it, like even you can just break down war like faction of it, and then you've got all these cool characters that also have their stories. I'm like, sometimes I'll focus on a different character each time I watch it, and then you kind of get something new from it.
Probably the last, like, I watched it a few days ago, and focusing more on even like the Witch of the Waste. Yeah. And how
she's such
like,
a weird character.
I know. Like, and how she's brought in at the very start, completely fucks up Sophie's life for practically no reason. Yeah. And then comes back as like a secondary character, and
who they take like, sympathy on.
And it's kind of like, you've messed up this whole girl's life, and she's like, I don't know how to fix it. I just did it on a whim. Yeah. I thought you were with Hal.
Yeah, she's such a weird character, and I guess it's cool that despite what she's done to Sophie, Sophie forgives her and brings her into the family once she's super vulnerable. Like, if she had just been like, nah, I still hate you, she probably would have died.
I feel like Sophie could kind of see in The Witch of the Waste a bit of like Hal, because Hal was like, oh, I have to use all this magic to make me beautiful. Like, she had done the same thing in the past, and like, so Hal had like distanced himself from her. But she can just see that she's just like still this really powerful being, but she's also just old and
just like how she's been like taken advantage of by the government and
she's more of like a victim of her circumstance rather than an actual like bad person, which I feel like is quite common throughout a lot of Ghibli movies, is that like a lot of the antagonists are not really antagonists. They're kind of just misunderstood, desperate people.
What do you think is like the main thing that you take from Howls Moving Castle?
A lot of it is probably like with the three mains, like Howl, Calcifer, and like Sophie. And how Sophie's like, she just works in this like quaint little hat shop, doesn't feel like she's worth much. She doesn't like think of herself as like beautiful, like especially compared to her sister and her mum, and like,
she seems quite like introverted as well compared to her sister and her mum and stuff, who are all out making friends and about town.
And like it seems like even though she's still quite young, she's kind of accepted her life as it is. Like when she gets like made to be a super old woman, she's like, oh, at least my clothes fit me now. But she doesn't see obviously what like Hal sees, or even Calcifer or Markle sees. See her as like such a kind and like giving person, and she doesn't like, she betrays herself as being old even when she was in her younger form. I don't know, she just doesn't see herself as she is, and I feel like all the characters in the movie can see that, and even when she's like older and she's standing up for herself or having a bit more of like a childish time, like the animation reflects that, she can't see who she is. And I feel like a lot of people put themselves down in the same way. They're like, oh, this is my life, this is how it will always be, but like seeing yourself from someone else's eyes, I feel like that's quite good with like Sophie. And Howl sees himself as on the outside, he's like, I'm such a pompous, beautiful wizard and I am great. But on the inside, he's like
falling apart.
He's like completely falling apart and has like can't keep up this facade and like Sophie kind of helps him with that. Even though he like has a panic attack about turning ginger and like trying to pull the whole house down with slime, he doesn't see that he looks exactly the same no matter what his hair color is.
Exactly. And they don't care about whether you're ginger, blonde or black haired. Like, it's not a problem. You're still the same Howl at the end of the day.
Little mismatch of a house, and like they all just bring little things to it. At the moment, probably the biggest thing that I take away from it is that all of these characters are just trying to figure themselves out. By the end of it, they're all like heading towards that way. Like, it doesn't like finish with them all being the perfect version of themselves, but they're getting there. They're
all trying to fix their little problems or take responsibility and kind of mature in that aspect, but then it's cool to see them all help each other. Calcifer and Howl were still already together, but it's not until Sophie comes in where she tames Calcifer, you know, and kind of helps him to open up a bit and stop being just an angry little flame dude. And then in turn that reflects on Howl, and then everyone kind of like comes together. And I think it's cool to see that despite Sophie not thinking that she's great and not really having much confidence, how she affects everyone in the house. It's really cool to see. Even with Markle and like letting him just be a kid.
Instead of having to put on his disguise and practice his magic all the time, he gets to be like himself and be a child. I think that's like quite cool with the contrast of like probably how Howl was brought up as a wizard, and like even when he cuts his hair, and then you see in the castle that all the like little apprentices have their like hair cut with like the bowl cut thing, but Markle doesn't have to be there. Like, you can still be a kid while practicing his magic.
His terrible disguise. Sophie, I guess because she's had that physical appearance taken away from her, her youth taken away, and so it's all about the personality of the person. It kind of lets everyone around her then just be themselves. And even Hal, when he's beautiful and everyone's like, I don't care, you're a problem.
You have a lot of things going on that you're not sorting out.
Please. Please sort
so he's like, out. They don't really see him as like this beautiful character. They're all like, oh man, you have issues.
And saying that, what's like your favourite scene from the movie?
Well, there's the start of the movie
where he saves her.
Yes, and that's not for any like philosophical reason. It's still,
even in the like, I don't even know how long it is, but like 3-5 minutes, you get told that he would have like eaten her heart. You realise that he is just a nice guy, and everyone's kind of been tricked to think this way, and then
it's because like
here he is to save the day and actually be a gentleman.
The government has this whole thing of their way of being like, don't trust the people who don't work with us. But probably the scene that like I like the most at the moment is after they manage to put Hal's heart back, and he's like waking up, and like Sophie's back to her young self but still has the grey hair, and he's just like, I love your hair, it looks like starlight. And it's kind of like her reaction to that, and his like, that's the first thing he notices when he wakes up. Like, he's not thinking about himself in that moment, being like,
for a
alive.
change.
And like she accepts that, and she's like, oh, like I'm so glad you're alive, and actually accepts the compliment. And so I feel like that shows, even though it's like a small moment, it shows quite a bit of growth between like both of the characters. Like Hal's not just like, I wonder how I look, just being brought back from the dead. She's accepted who she is, he's accepted who he is.
And she probably hasn't even noticed that she's young again now. She's worried about him, and he was thinking of her, and
I think that out of all the Ghibli movies, it's kind of probably one of the movies with like the most meaning that people don't see. It can be like seen as a coming of age movie. It can be seen as like Howl being a reflection on Miyazaki's like hate for war. How Howl is like, I don't want to be a part of it. This is dumb. I'm watching all these people who do the same thing as me like lose their humanity through it. It can just be taken in so many different ways.
It's one of those movies that gets richer the more you watch it. Even if you're talking about the war aspect of it, like Hal's initial plan is to fight fire with fire, basically. And he's like, nah, it's fine, I can beat them. But then really it's not until they kind of let that mentality go and just be themselves and they're like, it's fine as long as we have each other, kind of
Yeah.
this cute little family moment, and then the war stops.
Yeah, the war just ends because the like turn up head scarecrow's like, I'm
I'm
the
the
prince that started the war. I got cursed. I'm gonna go back now.
Yeah.
We're good. We'll be good. It's all fine. They did that. They're like, this is like the whole backdrop, and like Sophie gets to see how bad the war is. The Witch of the Waste is like, I finally get like invited to this thing, and then like finds out that she's just going to get all her power stripped from her.
Yeah.
Hal doesn't want to fight in the war. He just wants to do his own thing. And then once their personal conflicts are resolved, the war's like, I'm out.
Yeah. The
Yeah,
outside
it's-
world reflects like their personal conflicts. And then you've got Heen, who's just like like I was
Hanging out.
reading a thing about Heen, and it was just, you know, Heen's been looked after, and it's Heen finding his independence. And I was like,
it's like, I don't
this
want to be
is-
here anymore.
the dog has like is hardly there. Like, he gets mistaken for Hal, but he has no words, but he still has a story of going and being where he wants to be. And
One of the funniest bits of the whole movie is just Heen being mistaken for Hal, and Sophie talking to him as Hal, and probably this dog being like, I'm not who you think I am, man, but I can't tell you that.
Yeah.
And just her reactions to being like, who the fuck are you? Why did you hear?
and he's not cursed or anything. Like,
And he just
a
makes
dog.
the decision to be like, actually, these people seem better than the other ones. I'm gonna get on this like flying tiny thing
Yeah, I'm gonna
and go with them. And then at the very end, he's like, look where I am.
so cute.
Bye.
You've got characters, you know, like down to the dog, having these cool developments in their lives. Like, you've thought about every character. I don't think there's like a
everyone.
character that slips by. Even Letty, her sister, she's only in it really at the start, but she's got so much personality.
There hasn't been a character that was like lazy in Howls Moving Castle, especially with like Calcifer, who's super sassy. I feel like one of his turning points was when Sophie was cleaning all the house, and then it's like, holy shit, you're moving this whole thing. And she's like, she likes my spark.
Dude
And
just
he's
needed
been-
a compliment.
Yeah, he's been hanging out with Hal, who's like super depressing, and he's like, no one ever notices me. And then my one friend is probably going to lose his humanity soon because of like the whole thing we have going on.
It just needs to be loved, really.
Yeah.
Like, I think before Sophie came along, everyone was so focused on taking care of each other that when she came along, she started taking care of the
Yeah.
thing, then let them take care of themselves.
It's like she came along and gave not permission, but allowed them to actually come into their own. And yeah, Calcifer's not this fire demon who's moving house around, who is tied to Hal. Markle's not just this wizard apprentice who probably doesn't get the teaching and like attention he should get from Hal.
Yeah.
And even though she just comes in as a cleaning lady, she's not like cleaning the house. She's like cleaning up their lives and like
yeah.
taking away the unnecessary stuff so that they can actually work on themselves.
Yeah. And I guess despite her not having confidence and stuff at the start, she's still quite stubborn and knows who she is.
Yeah.
Because at no point is she like, oh, woe is me. Like,
Until like one moment where she had her breakdown being like, oh, screw you, I've never been beautiful, stop being such a drama queen.
Yeah.
But she still comes in to be like, oh, he's like obviously struggling with this. I will help him and walk him up the stairs and get him in the bath.
And she's very quick to like pull herself back together.
Yeah. She went outside, had a fat cry, and was like, okay.
There's stuff that needs to be done,
Yeah.
and I'm gonna get it done.
Yeah, she's like got what they haven't got, and they've got what she hasn't got. And it's kind of like them sharing their good parts with each other and trying to work through the bad parts together.
I guess because Hal and Sophie and all of them are kind of in that weird age where you're like not an old adult, but you're also not a kid anymore. But then it seems like all the old adults are kind of dicks.
Oh, yeah. They're in the stage where you're like, I
Like,
need an adult, but they
all suck.
Yeah. And then like they're like, I'm an adult, but not an adult. I need an adultier adult, but all
Yeah.
the adultier adults suck. Kind of
Madam
like-
Sullivan's a dick.
The king
Witch of the
is a
Waste is
dick.
older, but she's a dick. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like all of those like older characters have become like super jaded by everything, accepted the way things are.
Like they never got to fix themselves.
Yeah.
And so now are just a product of, they're just like, oh, this is just how I am.
Hal and Sophie are kind of, in a way, rejecting that. Like, Sophie doesn't care about the fanfare of all the soldiers walking through the town.
And I guess it just shows that, like, escapism doesn't really work. You'll just end up like one of those adults if you don't deal with your shit. Which is, like, a hard truth that probably not many people want to be like, oh, I have to deal with my stuff. Like, yeah, you do. Otherwise you end up you just become one of those people that don't question anything. Like, they don't question that maybe the government's doing something wrong, or like that war is bad, or, you know, they're all just going along with what they've been told. Exactly.
It's kind of like they never even mention who they're fighting, because to the story that doesn't matter. There is a war happening, no one knows why, but everyone's been told that everything is great because we have the best army or whatever. I think a reflection on, like, a lot of the stuff that happens in real life, and then, like, Miyazaki's, like, hate for war, and him being like, look at all these people just, like, blindly following what's going on.
Like, why aren't you asking why this is happening? Or,
yeah.
And even with Madame Sullivan, because, like, since
she didn't get away, like, she took all the power away from the Witch of the Waste. She was about to do that to Howl. Like, she thought she was doing something by being like, haha, show Sophie who you really are.
Yeah.
But, like, Sophie already knew.
Exactly. Yeah.
But she was trying to use it as, like, a negative thing when she was like, oh, I see, you're in love with Howl. And she was, like, not her really realizing it too much at the time. But her trying to be like, oh, I know his weakness now, it's you. And her just trying to get back what she used to have. But she's, like, very manipulative. You only see the king for, like, a real short amount of time, and he's just like, we're gonna bombard them all, we're gonna take them down, and he's just like this war-loving king. Quite different from how Howl presented himself as the king. He's like, we're not gonna use magic anymore, we're gonna...
I love that moment. It's like, oh man, you had no idea what the king was actually like, but you tried to impersonate him, and, like, that kind of shows some innocence/ignorance there.
Yeah. And then for, like, everyone else who probably assumes that the king is more gracious like that, but then he just waltzes in being like, we're gonna kill them all. And the people don't see that of the king. They was like, especially when Sophie's like, but he's the king, he should be willing to listen to, like, all of his citizens. But he's really just a warmongering, like, crazy man. Yeah, I think there's, like, a lot to be said about every character, even, like, for how little you see the king. Miyazaki definitely has a way of getting the most out of characters despite how much screen time they have. Not even just, like, character design, but, like, character arcs, even if they're, like, 5 seconds long.
Yeah.
The king is crazy and he just wants to kill everything. There's a massive war going on for no reason. Everyone thinks he's great, so they keep getting away with everything. Probably most people don't know about Madame Sullivan. And, like, how she's just pulling all the strings. And
it's definitely one of, like, the more deeper Ghibli movies, I think, personally. I think it also kind of tricks you at the start, because when Howl saves Sophie, you're kind of like, oh, what a fairy tale. You think that it's going to be Prince Charming's come along and saved the damsel in distress, and now you have a romance. And then it just kind of turns into therapy.
They don't end up at the point where they're like, they've fallen in love with each other, like, real purposefully. It's like them constantly being around each other. Howl never even questioning that she was, like, older. And, like, they still, even while, like, she's presenting older, even though, like, Howl was probably like, yeah, I understand you're not actually older.
Yeah, like,
he's like, I know who you were. And they end up just, like, falling in love by being, like, around each other and getting to know each other. Yeah, he's definitely not, like, the Prince Charming that he's presented at the start, especially when he's, like, in his room after his little sob. And she's like, do you want some milk? And he's like, I don't want milk.
Surrounded by his little teddy bears. Like, he's got a little, like, moo cow thing. And it's like, oh, you're still such a child. You found out all of Howl's problems and got to the bottom of it.
Yeah.
You've gotten to the bottom of Sophie's problems, of Calcifer's problems, of Markle's problem. Yeah, you've kind of had a therapy session with these characters in between the fairy tale.
Yeah. It wasn't just, like, everything was perfect and then they had, like, one big thing that, like, is... like, the problem in the movie. Like, there's constantly, like, little problems that you can pick up with all of them. The ending of the movie is not particularly suggesting that, like, everything is always going to be fine, because throughout the whole movie not everything was fine. When the, like, Scarecrow turns back into the prince, it's kind of like, oh, this was a really dumb reason for war, so it's probably going to happen again. Their problems are resolved, but not the world's, really. Yeah. They're probably going to face similar shit like
well,
this.
Maybe if everyone, you know, found their their true selves or like their hearts, just like Hal had got his heart back and found his true self again, maybe we wouldn't need this shit.
Yeah, it's kind of like the fact that Hal didn't have a heart, but all the other like normal, greedy, annoying, terrible humans did, and like Hal was still
able
a
to
better
change.
person. Yeah, and like he was like better than all of them still. So it's kind of like this guy who's super stuck up, doesn't even have a heart, only worries about himself, still has a better moral compass
than
than
some
most
of you.
people.
Yeah. Hal could definitely be selfish at times, and it was never to the point where it was damaging to those around.
Yeah, like they had to
he
put up
was
with these, like,
self-sacrificing
tantrums.
for sure, and it was like, well, we care about you, so please just don't go out and eat yourself. Like,
Yeah, and they wouldn't care about him if he was just only those things.
yeah. When the Witch of the Waste takes Hal's heart, she's like, it's mine, I want it. And she's like this old lady, and she's like, it's so pretty, I get his heart, yay. And like, instead of, I guess most people's first reaction would be like, no, that's you give it back, like, and get quite aggressive. But Sophie just gives her a hug and is like, can I please have this? Like, I promise I'll look after it, and just kind of embraces her as being a part of the family, and that she doesn't have to be that way anymore.
Like Sophie trying to remind her to be like, it's
We're better
okay,
than this
we're
now.
not like, no one's leaving you.
Yeah.
Please, we just need the heart for Hal, so like, he is here, because with, like, if you keep the heart, he's not there.
Yeah.
So it's like, and not so many words being like, you don't need this anymore. You are your own person, and we'll like still look after you.
But I thought that was like a really sweet moment, and kind of showed how far everyone had come for that turn to kind of happen, and then show it. And like, it's like, hey, we're not gonna do what Hal did and fight fire with fire. We're not gonna rip the heart from her hands and be a dick to her now. We're just gonna give her a hug, say everything's gonna be okay, and that it's gonna be better this way.
A lot more people should just talk. There's just heaps.
Probably
Too
says
much.
a lot about the world as it is now.
Yeah.
Which I think also just made it a good movie for last year as well. Like, probably why we watched it so much last year.
Yeah.